This makes it worse, in my opinion. He did this at a time when the church, and I tried to look this up as best as I could, the church was not meeting. In other words, because of COVID-19, Max Lucado's church wasn't having services. They were having internet services. They're still having internet services. And I put the COVID-19 response here where they, talk about this. You can go to their website. You can look at their COVID-19 response. Go to their videos from the past few months. You can see they're online. They're not in-person gatherings. Now put that in perspective. Going to a worship service, having a worship service, it's not that important because we can just do that online. But we need to show up in person for the George Floyd prayer vigil, and our pastor, Max Lucado, is going to speak at it. What does this smell like to you? I mean, it smells like hypocrisy to me. It smells like your priorities are in the wrong place. So I found that out. Now, here's the article. So why did I bring all that up? I brought that up to just say there seems to be a slide in 2020 with Max Lucado, or at least there's revelations of some things that we didn't realize before that now we're seeing. Here's what I saw, and we're just going to read this. I'm going to respond to it. Pastor Max Lucado asks forgiveness for Christian white supremacy. San Antonio Report, August 9th, 2020. Realize he's doing this at a time his church is not meeting in person. But there he is at an event where people are meeting. Prominent local pastor and author Max Lucado got down on his knees Sunday in San Antonio to beg forgiveness for his and his white ancestors' acts of racism and inaction. Now, this is written by the San Antonio Report. I've said this before, but when we hear the language of lament, we're just lamenting in our church. We're having a lament service because Christians who do that, they want to get away from the word repent. They want to say, well, we're not repenting, we're lamenting. Because they know if they start doing the repenting thing, they're in trouble. They're playing with some biblical doctrine of repentance there. But if they say lament, they can kind of get away with it. Now, my point is the world doesn't see it that way. The world sees it. It's repenting. Because what does he say here? Yeah, Max Lucado is getting down on his knees. He's begging for forgiveness. I'm sorry that I have been silent. I am sorry that my head has been buried in the sand, Lucado said. My brothers and sisters are hurting, and I am sorry. I have made them to feel less than. I did not help. I did not hear. I did not see. I did not understand. Now, what is it that he is not seeing, what he's not understanding? Now, the article goes on, says organizers estimated that roughly 3,000 people of all faiths, attended the emotional Park and Pray event at Freeman Coliseum Sunday evening to follow local faith leaders in prayer to eliminate racism and coronavirus. At least 23,000 more were watching online. All faiths. So he's doing this. He is repenting saying to an audience of not just Christians, presumably. All faiths. So Muslims there, Catholics there, in the sense of Roman Catholics, so not Protestants. Are Mormons there? Like, how ecumenical is this event that he's willing to go to while their church is just doing online streams? And there he is. He's standing up there. He doesn't have a mask on. He's, reading, I guess, from the Bible, but that's the picture. The Oak Hills Church pastor's prayer comes amid Black Lives Matter protests and calls for racial equity across the nation. Look, the world sees this. This is part of my point. If you think you're doing something different, we're Christians, we're going to get behind this. No, the world looks at that and they're saying, okay, yeah, he's saying he's sorry, and this is in the context of the Black Lives Matter protest. Of course they're connected in the mind of people that are observers outside the church. Lucado spoke candidly about the sin of racism in and outside of the church. Your church, your pastors have broken your heart by favoring one skin color over another. O Lord God, have mercy on our souls. How dare we? How that must nauseate you, O Lord, he said, adding that those sins extend to brown skin and that he himself has committed them. So far we have nothing. It's just, we don't understand. We're racists. The church is racist. I mean, if you really want to create a formula for making sure the young people leave the church, why don't you just say that we're just all a bunch of racists, the church is characterized by racism, and that's part of who we are. You really want to be part of that organization? Probably not. It's like the least tolerated, quote unquote, sin in America is racism. So That's who we are. Now, so he's making all these accusations. Well, where's the meat? Where's the proof? Well, here it is. The word wetback has found its way on my lips too, he said. For that, I'm so sorry, so very sorry. Would you please, O Lord, bring a new day? Now, I remember so I was a teenager when this happened, but I remember I had a thought about it was something my mom was, a dress my mom was wearing or something, and I had a thought to myself that this particular dress didn't look as good on her as other things she had worn, and so I decided to tell her that, right? And as a young teenager, you can imagine how that went for me. And of course, I remember my father sitting me down and saying, because I think my father was kind of like, look, you're going to get into your dating years here, and you can't do that. Like, keep that to yourself, right? And so one of the things that I learned is that when you sin, you're sinning against someone, either someone who's a person or someone who is the Lord, right? And if you sin against a person, you're also sinning against the Lord. So you're always sinning against the Lord whenever you sin. But sometimes you're sinning against a person as well. Now, here's the question. If someone doesn't know that you've sinned against them, right? They're completely unaware of it. Is it your responsibility to go tell them, I had a bad thought about you? I mean, should you tell your friends? If your friends knew all the thoughts you ever had about them, or even your wife or your kids, if they knew the thoughts that you had about them, or your husband or your parents, what would they think of you? Would that be a cruel thing to confess those things to them, to tell them? Or would that be the right thing? Now, if it's connected to, if there's a pattern of behavior and you're exhibiting that to them and they can see it and it's obvious and you're hurting them, then yeah, maybe it's appropriate to say, you know what, I've harbored these feelings for a while, I'm sorry, because they're coming out and they're hurting that person. But if you're not hurting them, if they don't know and it's a fleeting thought and you get rid of it, or you said something to yourself, or you said something when they weren't present, and is that something you want to bring up and tell them? Because now they know that you've said it. Before they didn't, now they do. And think about your own life. Go back and think about all the things you've said in the last however many years. If we were to have a transcript of everything you've ever said, everything you've texted, jokes out of context, jokes that were a little off color and you just didn't think them through and you said them, what kind of ammunition would we have to destroy your public character? Probably loads of it. Probably everyone would be canceled. Every single person in the country, right? If we could do that. If we had and now bring it to your mind. If you had a transcript of everything you've thought. When Max Lucado does this, I think it's cruel in a way. I think that. I just don't think there's not a reason to say, to apologize to a whole community of people, to a whole demographic. Well, I said this about you guys once. Well, they didn't even know you said it about them. Well, now they do, because you're saying that you're bringing up something that can cause potential hurt when you didn't need to. You could have just confessed that to the Lord and moved on. You didn't actually sin against them in the sense, in a way that hurt them. Now you're hurting them because you're bringing it up. So to me, this actually is selfish when you do something like that. This is kind of, look at me, look, this is the Pharisaical prayer. Look, I am, I'm confident enough to admit that I've said this kind of thing. And now you're hurting people in your own confession where they weren't hurt before. The article goes on. Car horns blared throughout the parking lot in support of his message. They were parked at least one space apart to ensure social distancing. So they, I guess, couldn't figure out a way to do this for church, but they're doing it for this event. And then it talks about this black pastor. According to the article, black pastor Dorian Williams, and he has a prayer forgiveness. Never in my life have I ever seen a white person say to me that I'm sorry, Williams said, pausing to hold back, then release tears. That I'm sorry for what happened to your people and our ancestors were wrong. It is a new day in San Antonio. What's going on here? This is symbolic. It's like the federal head, this black pastor, forgiving Max Lucado, the white pastor, on behalf of white people who are the oppressors and black people who are the victims. And this ignores the complexity of history totally. this ignores, just off the top of my head, how many quote unquote white people from Europe have come here since slavery was abolished in this country? They don't have any connection to it. How many people who were here at the beginning of the country didn't have any ancestors who enslaved anyone? Because it was the minority of white people who were able to even do that. How many black people in this country are descendant from slave owners either in Africa or slave owners in the United States? Because there were thousands in the South on the eve of the war who owned slaves, free black people who owned slaves. So these lines are, I mean, like, think about even this, even those who own slaves, like Thomas Jefferson. I was just reading some quotes by him the other day, or Robert E. Lee. Like, how many of those guys were in tough positions where it would be cruel for them? It would be a worse situation if they freed their slaves. So they tried to practice, from what I understand, I'm not getting into the whole Jefferson situation in this episode and whether or not he, whether or not he did what people accuse him of doing. But they, in essence, tried to treat their slaves charitably, and that was the best they could do. But at the same time, they didn't want slavery around. They wanted it to be gotten rid of through usually a progressive emancipation of some kind that wouldn't hurt the welfare of the slaves too much. So, how many people are like that, where if you get into their biographies and you start reading about who they were and how they treated their slaves and what they thought of the institution, it's not as black and white as people make it out to be. All that to say, to then have this cartoon of the black person's going to forgive the white person, you have already bought into the assumptions of the critical race theory paradigm. The new left critique, you've bought into it at that point. Because that's what you're assuming. You're assuming the guilt is on this person because they're white, and the innocence is on this person because they're black. And that's why the white person confesses and the black person forgives. It's not biblical. Every person is capable of racism, and every group has had persecution against them and has been the persecutors at some time. In your DNA, if we trace back your ancestors, you're going to find brutes, you're going to find saints. You're going to find people that were persecuted. You're going to find people who were the persecutors. It's called human nature. It's called total depravity. It's what Christians used to believe. So this is the situation. We have to release white people from their sins that you did not commit, he said. What in the world does that? Hold on a minute. We have to release white people from the sins they did not commit? Then what is there to be released from? If you didn't commit the sin, then you don't need to be released from something. Like if someone said, I need to release you from the sin of stealing, though you never stole anything. What does that mean? I mean, it's so blatant that they're buying into this. He's acting like no white person has ever regretted slavery or so. Like, just about every person in this country, I mean, the majority of people, myself included, think that slavery was a terrible idea, and we're good riddance to it. We're glad that it's gone. Doesn't mean that we don't have I have a just like Booker T. Washington did. I can see the providence of God in how he brought some people from a place where they would not have heard the gospel to a place where they had some access to it, however limited. Doesn't mean I don't see the providence. I don't see that God is doing something and moving populations around, etc. But I don't know of anyone. I don't think I've ever met anyone who didn't say, yeah, that was a bad idea. That was wrong. That, speaking broadly of the whole entire scenario, that they wish that, that scenario had not happened organically in the way that it happened. But, they're acting like white people have never done this. It's a new day in San Antonio. White people never cared until now. And we're going to release these white people from the sins that they did not commit. I know that's unpopular, he says, but God said, if you don't forgive your brother, how am I even reading this? He's forgiving them for things they didn't commit. Said, I'm not letting slavery send me to hell. No longer will I walk around being angry and bitter at white people that I don't even know. I feel like I have a right as a black man to be angry. Doesn't mean that we're not fighting for justice, but we are in bondage when you walk in anger. And car horns blasted in support of that. Well, I'm glad he doesn't want to have hatred in his heart, but he does not have the right to be angry. And this may be unpopular for me to say. The right to be angry. We just did a podcast, the last one, on rights and responsibilities. there are certain things you are responsible to be angry about, right? Be angry and do not sin. Righteous indignation over something that has taken place. And sometimes you do need to be angry, and you need to go do something about it, because it's within your power to do something about it. Abortion might be one of those things, right? This is something that should make us angry. Right down the street, people, are dying on a daily basis. We should probably do something about that, right? We should probably try to get laws changed, convince women not to go into that clinic. But we're talking about things that happened hundreds of years ago, or at best, 50 years ago? When we're talking about things like that, you can look back at history and you can say, man, I wish that didn't happen, an anger of regret, I guess. But if you're going to personalize that and say that I'm bitter against these people that did nothing because they are downstream from that, and you're going to, be angry at white people, you got a problem, man. You don't have a right to be angry at white people as a demographic. For even present things like George Floyd, you don't have a right to do that. Before the event, Williams said that the event was organized to provide a sense of healing for people who have been longing for fellowship. I doubt it promoted that. Let's see. So Lucado echoed Williams in his opening remarks. He said, maybe you thought you came to be entertained. Maybe you came to be preached to. Maybe you thought this was a political gathering. I am so very sorry, but it's not. We're here to pray. And here's interesting. All right. In 2016, Lucado was one of the first evangelical pastors to criticize then-President candidate Donald Trump. He made headlines in December when he adapted the story of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus' escape to Egypt from the book of Matthew as that of a family on a journey through Mexico, fleeing violence from cartels. So, so here's the thing. This is actually very interesting. Peter Rockwood, who attends Lucado's church as well as Cross Mountain Church, said he and his wife have been attending church during the pandemic, but wanted to participate in this unprecedented gathering. Oh, they have not. Okay. I think this might be a typo. Sounds like they have not been attending church. Maybe that's what it meant to say. Okay. But he's saying they wanted to participate in this unprecedented gathering of diverse faiths and backgrounds. Okay, this is important. So a member of Lucado's church is saying, we wanted to attend this event of diverse faiths and backgrounds, even though Lucado's church is doing live stream. He said, it's an opportunity to be in God's presence, Rockwood said, before the prayers began. He's here among us. He's here among us, diverse faiths, and he's here among us. Opportunity for God's presence. Church is just live stream. Can't go to church, but we're going to attend this event because it's an opportunity to see God, even though there's people from diverse faiths. What does that mean? Now, this is just a member. I'm not putting these words in Lucado's mouth, but I hope Lucado reached out to this guy, or someone from the church reached out to him and said, what are you talking about? This is not a church gathering. Diverse faiths? Of course, trying to parallel the story of Jesus fleeing to Egypt, which was also part of the Roman Empire, with someone from Mexico coming to the United States, to politicize that's what mainline denominations do. That's what social gospel denominations do. That shouldn't be what Max Lucado is doing. That shouldn't be what evangelicals are doing, because they're not parallel at all. And countries do have rights to have a border and protect their people. You can't protect your people without a border. I didn't know that Max Lucado had done that. I'm finding this out for the first time. Let me give you a little bit on what's happening. I think this is the same day, if I'm not mistaken, that this prayer vigil thing, or what? Not prayer vigil, but this event that Max Lucado repented at for his white supremacy or racism. This was going on in Chicago. Police shootings of Englewood man reignites political debate. 13 cops injured, 2 people shot. Here's some pictures for you. This was written on the sidewalk. Kill Columbus. If you don't know, in Chicago, there's a statue of Columbus. Kill Columbus. and officers injured, 13 of them. Here's pictures of, I believe this is Best Buy, being looted completely. There's an aerial photo of it. I mean, this is all over Twitter. Looters broke into Chicago Mall and are looting the place clean tonight. There's a guy who live streamed himself looting by breaking into an ATM. I mean, this is what's happening in Chicago as Max Lucado is up there repenting for his sin of racism. Here's something else that just happened. Story was updated this morning. Wilson man wanted in fatal shooting of 5-year-old apprehended. Darius Sessmans, 25, was apprehended in Goldsboro by members of the U.S. Marshal Service, Carolinas Regional Fugitive Task Force, Goldsboro Police, and the Wayne County Sheriff's Office. He was charged with first-degree murder and was being held without bond in the Wilson County Jail. You know why? The reason why is because he killed a 5-year-old boy, his neighbor. He went up to him in the middle of the day, boy was playing, and he shot him in the head. Just killed him right there on the spot. Imagine the roles were reversed. Imagine it was a white guy who went and killed a black child. We'd probably have a few more Best Buys looted, wouldn't we? Media would be going crazy. Well, this is a local story. This isn't a national story. There's a lot of little local stories like that I've been sent over the past few months. They don't make it into the big leagues, into the national news. You won't remember this guy's name. I didn't even mention it, did I? Or I guess I did read it. His name is... let's see here. Darius Sessmans. You probably won't remember that. You'll remember George Floyd's name. But there are people who die all the time, and it doesn't fit the political narrative. A lot of them have died in these protests. It doesn't fit the political narrative. You won't remember their names, but you will remember George Floyd's name. Why is that? Because constant repetition by media elites. And that is the narrative they want going out. Now, I want to close this with a little bit of what I think is my explanation. Might not be a thorough explanation in every way, but this is what I think is happening. I do parallel this with what we just read about the Galatian heresy and Peter going along. I think there's fear. People who are saved are going along because of fear. I think there's people who are just following the leader who's afraid. The leader's afraid, but they're just following him because they think he's confident and knows what he's doing. And then there are people who are real heretics, who are they're combining religions and they know they're doing it. And where does Max Lucado stand in all this? I don't know. There's some real red flags in his ministry right now, and I really, we should pray for him. We need to pray for him. Hope that he's Peter in this situation, that he's just been, that he has not actually, he's not in heresy because he's not saved and he's pushing a false religion, but this is a very temporary thing, and he's going to realize it and he's going to snap out of it. And if he doesn't, that tells you something about him, unfortunately.